Hi, my name is Jordan Walter, and today I will be presenting about the political, economic, and socio-cultural reasons behind the popularity of tobacco in Japan. More specifically, I will be looking at the history and contemporary culture around smoking, and why this particular use of tobacco has been and continues to be a staple of Japanese society. First off, I want to address the question of why this is an important topic to research. If you look at this graph pertaining to Japan, it seems that smoking rates, particularly among males, has been continuously and markedly decreasing over the past few decades. If the issues that existed in the 1980s and before appear to be on a downward trend, why should this topic even merit discussion? The answer is apparent through trends not just within Japan, but between Japan and other relatively developed countries. If you compare this graph's trend lines for Japan and, for example, the United States and Germany, you see that while Japanese tobacco sales have steadily declined, the country still shows a significantly higher rate than many other developed nations. If we pull up a graph that shows even more contemporary trends showcasing data through 2023, we see that the downward trend continues, but that the discrepancy between American and Japanese smoking rates remains large. A study published by the CDC in 2023 showed that US smoking rates were at 11%. This is 34% lower than rates in Japan during that same year. So what is the takeaway? Smoking is slowly and surely being phased out of Japanese society, but it is still very much there and exists at disproportionately higher rates than in other countries like the US. My research aims to look at what aspects of Japanese political society in which ingrained cultural norms have contributed and continue to contribute to these higher smoking rates. My research focuses on three key dimensions in order to gain a comprehensive perspective on the matter. Number 1, governmental policy. Number 2, industry and formal group dynamics in politics. And 3, informal social groups and demographic trends. These three themes each contribute distinctly to answering my question, yet overlap across both time and social space. Because this presentation is brief, I'm choosing to focus on the governmental policy dimension here. This dimension covers how a lax approach to governing, policy creation, and monitoring of community adherence to new regulations has contributed to an environment where people smoke in places and in situations where they technically aren't supposed to. I'll subdivide this dimension into three main categories of analysis. Number 1, non-legalistic restrictions historically and currently imposed by the government. Number 2, the government's active downplaying of health effects. And number 3, the lacking infrastructure to enforce legalistic restrictions in Japan. This governing involves the usage of what are called soft law measures, where the government puts out recommendations and guidance but does not enforce adherence through pursuing legal action. A great example can be seen through this smoking sign. This sign uses very non-confrontational strategies to deter tobacco use through a pretty light-hearted message. This stands in stark contrast to the signs from other countries such as the US that enforce legal action on regulation breaks. Such an example is shown here. This sign, unlike the Japanese one, does not make light of the situation through recommendations, and it even encourages reporting observed violations to local law enforcement. The rise of the developmental state approach to industrial development likely also plays a role in Japan's smoking culture. The post-World War II government supported tobacco industry growth and didn't actively implement policies to regulate smoking. Instead, policy came from negotiations with activist social groups, while the government continued to prioritize economic development. The government has an extended history of deferring to these more soft law-oriented approaches. For example, in 1998, the Japanese government's Tobacco Countermeasures Deliberation Council decided against implementing additional restrictions because tobacco was widely considered an item of individual preference, and thus not to be restricted through coercive laws. In fact, only in 2018 did the Japanese government implement its first national anti-smoking law, which banned tobacco in public indoor spaces. This occurred an astounding 53 years after the US passed their first smoking law. The change is thought to have been motivated, at least partially, by the upcoming occurrence of the Olympics in Tokyo at that time. It was also only in the summer of 2018 that Japan adopted a revised health promotion law that took a more legalistic national stance on restrictions. Before this, regulations such as the 2017 Ordinance Protecting Children from Passive Smoking that correlated smoking to child abuse had been passed, but were viewed publicly more as recommendations than enforcements. The downplaying of health concerns extends back to the 1980s, when a court ruled in favor of continuing to allow smoking on Shinkansen trains. The court claimed that smoking did not impede on the limits of tobacco toleration, and that health effects from secondhand smoke could not be proven. and below is a picture of a smoking unit on a Shinkansen train. The failure of many of these cases boils down to how the Japanese government hasn't been proactive in collecting smoking data. While recent years have more publicly available data, historically little to no data was collected that delved into socioeconomic status, age, or education level. Interestingly, extensive data on differences in tobacco use by gender do exist. This lacking enforcement and data is further perpetuated by the fact that time, personnel, and monetary investment in smoking regulation has been subpar for years. The WHO has repeatedly deemed Japan's tobacco control insufficient, likely accentuated by the fact that they don't collect the necessary data to identify and address risks for vulnerable groups such as those with low income. Additionally, the actual level of enforcement and fine price are much lower than places like the US. They are technically smoking regulations for the sidewalks of Tokyo's Chiyoda ward, for example, but fines are only $10 to $20. And while Kyoto has outdoor restrictions, they reported no fines in 2019. Restaurants and tobacco companies have resisted many of Japan's new indoor smoking regulations, so while smoking regulations have increased, the influence of these industries in politics has resulted in many exceptions to the tobacco rules. For example, many restrictions only apply to new restaurants, not old ones or existing ones. The high tobacco use rates and ingrained culture of smoking in Japan can be attributed to the complex dynamics between governmental regulations, economic and formal group influence, and informal norms. An analysis of these three factors will help to answer the question of why smoking has been and continues to be popular in Japan today. Thank you.